Hello folks, this is LA Little, and this is your weekly TA Wrap, where we take a look at these markets from a neoclassical perspective and ask ourselves what happened last week and what might we learn from it for the coming one. I do the show once a week, every Sunday night live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of what is a seasonally changing Rocky Mountains. Folks, I'm glad you could join me. We had a big week last week. We got that pop of the top that we talked about. Then we got the retrace that we were also thinking would take place. Now the question is, what the heck do we do after all of that? What's the encore, right? What happens next? And if you look around, you look at their calendar and so forth, you know, the third quarter is about to wrap up. You got a lot more Fed speak going to happen now with the Fed doing their surprise I can't taper routine. You got overseas markets all at highs. You had huge volume on Friday. You had quadruple witching on the options. And just a lot happening. We got econ news coming at us this week. We've got earnings just around the corner. I mean, just, you know, it's a huge mess of stuff to look at, to digest. Of course, we try to simplify it and say, what do the charts tell us? But before we jump into the charts, let's take a look at the ending numbers here from Friday and see what they show us. If we do, we saw the composite. Saw the Nasdaq. Good Lord. Let me start over. We saw the industrials down the most, 185 points. Now, if you remember, the industrials, that was another piece of the mix. The industrials actually rejiggered on Friday in terms of who was in it and who was out. We added in a couple of financial names in Visa and Goldman Sachs, and added another technology name. It escapes me right now. I had it on the tip of my tongue. We already have Cisco. Oracle, I believe, is who we added. And then we took away a technology, HPQ, Alcoa, and Bank of America, if I remember right. And essentially, you took the losers out, put the winners in. And the result of that is you're going to have a lot more stocks out there that can move things, you know, in terms of their movement. And it looks like I've got some futures that are run off. I'm going to have to update those. But anyway, the Dow Jones, 185 lower, 15,451. We have the S&Ps down 12.5, 1709, 1710. That came right back into that swing point high that we broke on the way up. Composite, Index, and the Russell all hanging at the highs, down, you know, slightly, nothing big. The two big losers were the listed issues. If we go and start to look at the charts and to see what the charts tell us, you know, because this is where the story is, and we expected the pop of the top and then some sort of a retrace back into the swing point high, doing a retest regen on the S&P. The problem is we came in with huge volume. Now, sometimes that volume, you know, may turn out to be nothing, and this may be one of those cases because you actually had a lot of extra stuff going on, quadruple witching, the Dow Jones rejiggering I was just talking about, right? They could have drove all that volume, and that volume may just dissipate and not matter, but you still had the volume. It's not like it just went away. The thing is if you look at it here, you're coming back way too much into this price point. That tells me that we're probably going to get deeper into this versus not. We're coming into the support zone, into the retest, regenerate, but if you go over and you look at the weekly, right, what do you have there? You actually have a breakout because it held over it. That high on the weekly prior was 1709.67. We held at 1709.91. That's a breakout, and the volume expands on the breakout. So here it's actually a positive, whereas over here it's a negative. Okay, so again, and what you're going to see tonight is you're going to see mixed signals everywhere, and that's the first example of it. There's plenty more. That's not the only one. If we look at the Dow, now the Dow is kind of strange in that the Dow is a little one-off right now. And the Dow is showing you a huge pullback. It's back underneath that big bar. Volume expanded tremendously, and I'm pretty sure this is a result of the rejiggering, right? I know this was, and I believe this is too. Now, if you look at it here, you get over the top, you do a suspect breakout, right? And then you fall back, and that's all within the same week. If you look at it on a weekly, what do you have there? Well, you're actually pushing your highs, right? There's a big range up here, and you're pushing those highs with volume. So again, different story here on a weekly compared to the story you're seeing on your daily. Okay, and that difference that you're seeing there and the difference you're seeing here, it exists on all of them, and it exists in the sense that you've got a confluence of events taking place, making some things positive, some things negative, and when you see that, what you have to do is step back and say, okay, let's let the market tell us what it really wants to do, because right now we don't have enough information to know that. And what I mean by that is, let's go back one more time to the S&P. If we look at it on the short term, the S&P actually did a 2-bar reversal on Thursday. Remember, we were even talking about it, I believe, Thursday night. Should trade sideways to down. We traded down. That 2-bar reversal has done what it was supposed to do. Now you're coming into the retest GGM, but you're coming in with too much volume. At the same time, you have an ABCD up on the weekly and potentially on a daily. You actually have ABCDs up if we move over to the broader NASDAQ composite. And so if you just go through all these things, you can see the confluence of events where one thing's being positive, one thing's being negative. You had volume expand on all the indexes, many of the sectors. You saw it expand on overseas markets as well, which is interesting. And again, I get back to the point where, sometimes I don't know what the market's really telling me until it gives me a little more information. And unfortunately tonight, that's the way I feel. I don't have enough information here to know. What it does look like to me, though, is that we are going to struggle this week. And struggle in the sense that it's going to be hard to get up, and then potentially we could try to pull back a little bit deeper. That's the way it looks there. It looks the same on the NDX. If you look at those, on the NASDAQ composite, on the NDX, pull them over to the weekly, they look great, just charging on up, volume expanding. So there's nothing negative on those two indexes in terms of the way they're trading. On a longer term basis, you are getting a little pullback here with some volume on the shorter term basis. Same thing on the Russell. So the story to me is mixed. Mixed signals all over the place. I'm not going to go through all of the major sectors. I see a lot of questions up here, it looks like. Or if I don't know if they're questions, but I see a lot of commentary. So I'm not going to try to run through all of these sectors. I'm just going to hit a few of them. But they all are telling the same thing. You got ABCDs up. You had 2-bar reversals. Here's a good example of it. You got an A point here. You got a B point up in here. A pullback. Let me see. This one's probably not a good example of this. This is a good 2-bar reversal though, and you got the pullback. If I go to another one, like I think the XLB is a good one, you actually have a clean ABCD, a bullish ABCD up, and a 2-bar reversal. So here's that one. You can see the push up, the B point here, the C point there, pushing up, still has another 1.5% or so to go, gets to the top, does a 2-bar reversal, comes off with volume. Okay, will it complete the ABCD bullishness? Or will it simply give it all up, come back and do a retest regen now? It's not clear. It's not clear, and I can't judge one over the other. If I had to take a bias, I would take the bias of a little bit more of a pullback given the way the volume came in on Friday. And that's the way it looks to me. And it looks that way across all of them. If I pop over to something like, say, the XLP, one of the weakest sectors made a huge run, just like the Dow. Some of these components are in the Dow. Goes up, does the 2-bar reversal, then comes off hard. Right? And that's true there. It's true on the XLU. It's true on almost all of them. So mixed signals here, mixed signals on the indexes. Let's look at the OX markets. And the first place we need to look is bonds. If I look at the bonds still look to me like they're trying to push higher. They're trying to put in a bottom, and I mean that. I've been talking about this bar back from August 23rd for, ever since it happened. And that is that this thing wanted to push higher. It goes up, does the retest, regen, fails, come back, tries to regenerate lower, fails on the regenerate lower, and volume comes into it off the Fed day. This thing's going to try to test the Fed top again, probably as soon as tomorrow, the next day, and try to make it all the way back up here to test the swing point high. And I'm expecting it to actually get over it. Now, if I pull over on a weekly and look at it, the two big bars are here. That's your June 17th and 24th bars. That overlap you can see in this area. That's where it wants to try to trade to. And that swing point high on the weekly is 109.69. If you come back over and look at it on a daily, that's up in this area, right? That's where this is going to try to go to. Now, it's going to take it a while, and it's got a lot of resistance on the way, or I expect it to take a while. But that's where it's trying to trade back to. And that would blow away retest regens. Well, you've already had this one. It's going to blow away this one if it does it. And that's going to tell you got a trend change. I suspect that trend change is going to be nothing more than some sort of a range trade that plays out. It's just going to be a question of how high it trades. Now, if the bonds are going up, that means interest rates are coming down. That's going to help stock market, or it should. So that's a positive for equities. And if it plays out that way, it's a big positive. Dollar. The dollar got hammered on the Fed news, went down, tested into the lows, broke them on the dailies, okay? Looks to me like it's going to try to get back up, do some sort of a meek retest regen off these two lows. You got the fast follow through, a little bounce. It may or may not even have enough strength to get back up there. But if I look at it on a weekly, on the weekly here, you've got big bars it's coming into. Doesn't have the volume yet to blow them out. So I suspect it's probably going to hold this area and get some sort of a retest, regenerate attempt on the upside. On the weekly, it would be off of this bar. That's your June 17th bar. Going back to the daily, it's going to be off of these two bars. And I suspect these would be the ones that you see first. Force it to regenerate lower, test on that weekly, and then come back up and try to get back through these and get up as high as that low on the weekly, which is 21.82, which would get you back up into this area, right up in here. And we'll see if it plays out that way. But the point of it is the dollar is getting weaker. If the dollar is getting weaker, typically that helps equities as well. It hasn't been the story. Actually, equities haven't really cared about the dollar this year. Dollar's been strong and weak, and it didn't matter. They just keep going higher. So dollar looks to try to go lower, and if I look at the FXE, which is the largest weighting in the dollar index, you can see the breakout on it. It gets over that, comes back into it on Friday though with some good volume, which means it's probably going to do some more testing. If that's true, that dollar can actually go back up on the dollar and try that retest regens off those two swing point lows. On the weekly, you can see the FXE is now over a swing point high. So a pullback, it's suspect, a pullback into that on a weekly to retest regen would allow it to regenerate up and test the highs of the year. So that's the way the dollar is shaping up if you're playing the dollar or the currency markets. Dollar will switch over on the FXE dollar question to gold. Now gold had a huge spike up about 5% off the Fed news on Wednesday. Does a 2-bar reversal off that spike, comes back down, volume's pretty heavy as it comes back in. Question, I thought I saw a question. I know I have one over here in my email. Let me pop back up here. I see a question about silver, so we'll do silver next and handle that question as we go. And then I'll do the GDX, which is what the question is from the email that I got. Okay, so on the gold, looking at it one more time, you held over it. Not a very nice candle. This gold can come back in here and test this 124.70 area support. So let's go to silver though, because silver is where the question is. Let's see what silver looks like. I'll start on the weekly and then we'll go to the daily. So the silver weekly pushing back with volume. That's going to test that area and potentially test the gap. That's 2048. Got as low as 2045. Well, actually, that's interesting. So you got as low as 2045 and you had less volume. So that's actually a test in the gap already. That's a little bit different scenario. Let's go look at the daily. Okay, on the daily, the big spike up back in. Okay, this price point is 2105 and we closed at 21 and this is 2045. Well, as you can see here from the TA Today charts, that is where the support zone starts as a result of that bar itself plus the one prior. So that is support. Let me see what the question was. Do you have a read on SLV here as it's retraced quite a bit from the Fed announcement? You know, as I said, you know, these actually, that test on the weekly looks good. Now that's a weekly. So, you know, you may see a little bit more pressure here on the daily and it still hold on the weekly, right? I mean, that's possible, quite possible. I think the problem right now with almost all the reads is Friday's volume and the extent of the moves, like we saw here in silver and gold and the dollar and so forth. That makes the read very hard going into tomorrow. And I think you really have to give it a day and see what it wants to do. You know, is it going to test lower or not? I wouldn't be walking into any trades. There's no reason to. You need to, you know, in trading you get to pick your trades. You don't have to take them all. And right now, I don't believe there's enough information on most of these charts, almost all of them, to make any kind of a good read for tomorrow. If I had to make a read, as I said earlier, I would say that there's a small downward bias coming into tomorrow, given the way Friday traded because of the volume escalations and the pullbacks that we saw. So that's the way I feel. Let me quickly glance over what's been written here. Good evening, you all. Blah blah blah. Cool. Okay, we got a new member on here writing. That's great. Okay, so I don't see what phase of the market cycle is the market in. Well, that's a good question. It's in a confused stage. You know, in some ways, the market's telling you it's in the late stages of the early ramp that happens right before you move off of like industrials and so forth into safer stuff. But I mean, if you just remember, you know, 3-4 months ago, the problem now with the whole market cycle thought is that with all the intervention that we have, the cycles are all twisted around, and a lot of the relationships that used to exist just simply aren't there. They're all scattered all over the place. So I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to try to even understand what part of the market cycle we're in. I think the most important thing right now is to stay in tune with what's happening on both the short and intermediate term time frames and let that guide you. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, you're 5 years into, you know, what is this, 13, so we're 4 years now into a move off the bottom off 2009. Usually bull markets, and that's got to be called a bull market. I mean, we more than doubled in price. We're all-time highs on the Dow and the S&P. I mean, you can't call it anything other than a bull market. Usually those things only last 3.5, 4 years, and we're already there. So we should be quote-unquote late stage if we're talking about market cycles. But then again, we've never seen this kind of intervention on this scale around the world. So what does it mean? To me, it means nothing. Just stay in tune with the trends is what it means to me, and forget the rest of it. Okay, some individual stocks. GDX, there's a question on GDX. I have one in the email as well. So let's pop over to that and see what it looks like. So let me go to my subsectors, go to GDX. So the question on GDX has to do with the one I have in the email. Maybe you can review this. The next stop seems to be what I've been saying, what you have been saying all along, referring to me, the zone at the top of the 28th bar. And what I was talking about was this bar way back here, right? The June 28th bar, that wide price spread bar and the bottom of this August 9th bar is setting up a nice little area, and you can see a little support zone underneath there. This came in Friday and tried to test the bottom of the 25.47, which was the Fed bar where it spiked up. It got to 25.55. I expect it's going to test it tomorrow. Did not have the volume, but had good volume escalation, which is what makes me think it will get down there and test it. If it gets underneath it and stays under it, you're pretty deep into this bar, which means to me you are going to try to get back to the top of that bar and the bottom of the August 8th bar. That's what it looks like to me. And let me see, the rest of the question was, of course, how it comes into that will be important. Yes, it will. That will be how you make your decision. But yes, this looks to trade deeper. So GDX to me is not something I want to like tackle at this point. You just got to leave it alone, let it come back in if it wants to. Like I've said on some of the other charts already, you know, sometimes the market simply doesn't give you good reads, but so far this one looks like it is going to come back to that bar that was really kind of hard to believe when you're up here playing around, but that's what it looks like. Now if you look at it on a weekly, you know, just for context, you can't always look on the daily. You got to glance over and see what else is happening. If you look at it on the weekly, you actually had volume on the bottom. So there's nothing to stop it from going all the way to the bottom. So, you know, don't just assume that it will hold on that August, you know, that, what was it, August or what was it, June 28th, August 9th bars. You know, it may not hold there. It may go to the bottom of that June 1st, the June 28th bar. You know, there's nothing... You know, there's nothing to say it can't. You just have to read it as it comes back, and that would get you almost to the bottom of this bar if it does it. So, you know, my thought here is give it a little time. Let's see what it wants to do, see how it comes back. Primarily here on the daily to start with, what does it do with this bar tomorrow? That's the key. If it gets underneath it, you just got to stay out of the way and see how it wants to trade back into this one and make a decision there. So that's how GDX looks to me. Let's see here. Fred asked about PANW. I might as well do that one while I have a chance, and then I'll take and flip over because I want to take a few minutes and look at the larger picture one more time. So PANW. So what is the question? It says Kramer seems to like it. Not sure if it's a buy in terms of the tape. Well, one thing I learned about Kramer when I worked with him is he actually is a pretty good trader. It's just that Kramer gives you about 40 recommendations every day, so it makes it kind of hard to do anything with his recommendations. Okay, so he seems to like this one. All right, Palo Alto Networks. Let me take a second here and pull back and look at this guy on the cube. So bear with me a second. PANW. Okay, so what does this look like? So it's fairly new issue, doesn't have a long-term trend yet. It's already 83 sideways, so it's going to break, and it's sideways on both. So they got some good revs. I don't know about their earnings here. Communication devices, and it's reasonably volatile and huge short interest, 13%. Okay, so that gives us some context. Now let's go back in and look at the stock one more time. So if we zero back in here, so what do we got here? Okay, so the volume spikes are nice over here. I like the way the volume's coming in. Now let's look at it on the weekly. Yeah, so you can see the volume on the weekly coming in. That's going to try to set up an ABCD up, and it looks like it's going to get it to me. That low is 39, 40, 50. That's about 10 bucks. 10 on to here would get you about 54. 54 gets you to the next swing point high. That looks like a good target. So 54, and if I look at it on the weekly, okay, the big volume bar is 53.30 up to 62. So it looks to me like 53.54 is the target. When I come back on the daily, this range is 44 to 50, that's 6. Yeah, I think you can get 53 to 54 out of this. And I would probably use these bars as my stop. You can see the support zone right up underneath there, that little green zone right there. You just got to stop out down in here somewhere and take a shot. So yeah, it looks decent to me. Okay, let me flip over. I want to look at the, I want to do two things. One is I want to talk about the general market one more time, and then I want to talk a little bit about, I want to look at the overseas markets while I have a chance. So if I look at the overseas markets, I want to start in Europe. And I'm going to start with the CACs. You see volume escalation like crazy. Now, I know we had volume escalation here, but why would we have it over there? This is what I've been asking myself over the weekend. So we're pushing volume, we're at the top, and it did hold, right? But that's your CACs. It's at new highs, holding with volume. And then I look at the FTSE, and the FTSE is pushing towards the highs as well, and volume's there as well. Okay, so why is that? And then I look at the German DAX, and matter of fact, we had the Chancellor was re-elected tonight. I don't know what that will do to their markets, but here again, volume pushing in. So that doesn't, unless they have, and I don't know, unless they have triple witching or quadruple witching over in Europe at the same time we do, and maybe they do. I don't know that. I don't know why all the volume all around the world. And I can go to Europe, Asia, it's the same thing. So when volume escalates that much, that just tells me I just need to, calm down, take a deep breath, give the market a chance to tell me what it wants to do before I do much of anything. I don't need to reposition. I don't need to try to change all my positions or anything. I simply need to wait for the market to give me more information for me to make some decisions on. And so what I'm suggesting to you tonight is that's where I'm at. Now, I don't know where you are, but that's where I am. And until I get a little bit more information, I can't do much about what I see. Because right now, the only thing I have is a slight bias coming in tomorrow to the downside. And I think this week looks like it's going to shape up to be a struggle week. You had a good September already. It looks like it's going to struggle into the close. And that's kind of what it looks like to me. All right. Okay, folks, this week I am going to be gone. I will not have a show. I will do my show Wednesday night and then I'm gone. No show Thursday, no show Sunday next week, no weekly show, and no show Monday. I will be back here in the saddle on Tuesday. I need some time off. Haven't taken time off in over a year. I just need to go regenerate my batteries a little bit. No testing, just regeneration. Folks, have yourself a great week. I'll talk to you tomorrow night. We'll see what the market wants to give us in the way of information so we can make a little better decision. Have a good one. Take care. Thanks, as always. Appreciate it.